The mystery of the goddess. This most beautiful female sculpture is shrouded in mystery of the ages. They say that once in ancient times, the goddess Aphrodite was born out of sea foam. But about 200 years ago, she again appeared to people on the island, but not from the foam of the sea, but from a dark crypt. Who and when erected this crypt is a mystery, as well as who created the beautiful white marble statue, and why hid it. Even the story of the discovery of Venus de Milo is full of incomprehensible secrets. However, this is how it should be in the life of a true goddess. The spring of 1820 was not easy on the small Greek island of Milos. At first the island was battered by the winds of the Aegean Sea. Then there were incessant rains. And only later came the first rays of the long-awaited sun. Fishermen, retraining in the peasants, reached for arable land. Joagas Castro Buttonese Blau, stuck in a large crack. Leaning down, the bewildered peasant found an ancient crypt beneath. And at its bottom there is a perfectly preserved white marble goddess of beauty. The farmer told his son and nephew about the discovery. Together they began to dream how they would sell the statue and become rich. At night, the trio secretly went to get the find. But it was too heavy. And when the son and his nephew abruptly jerked the marble figure, its upper part suddenly separated from the lower one. This bust they brought home. A heavy lower part had to be left in the crypt, for reliability, covered with earth. Buyers were found quickly. The French brigantine La Chevrette just arrived at Milos. Buttonese offered the statue to young officers, Lieutenant Dumont d'Urville, and Lieutenant Matura. They have come to him under the cover of night, grimacing at the poverty situation, a roughly cobbled table, rotten mattresses, straw mats. But on one of the worn mats, lay a marble bust of a woman, of unspeakable beauty. At first glance, it became clear, the ancient antique work. The lower part of the statue in the dungeon, whispered Buttonese. The Turks, the present owners of the island, have forbidden us to deal with foreigners, but I will show you secretly. And the French went to the landlord. They climbed into the crypt, illuminating the path with lanterns. Having got out, they began to persuade the peasant not to show the greatest find to anyone and certainly not to sell. Now the officers have no money to buy, but they will tell about it to their chief, the French ambassador. He would send for the statue and pay well to Buttonese. The peasant, badly understanding, listened, but nodded. Hearing the story of his officers, Marquis de Rivia, a passionate collector, took urgent measures. He secretly sent an embassy ship relay to Milos. The ship, commanded by the secretary of the embassy, Viscount Marsalles, arrived on the island in the evening, but as soon as he entered the bay, the moon highlighted another ship there. Grabbing his binoculars, the Viscount looked at the Turkish flag, and on the shore he saw sailors who dragged something white and heavy on the ropes. Looks like a damned peasant did find a buyer. Everyone, row to the shore. Marsalles shouted to the sailors. If you manage to win back the statue from the Turks, everyone has a barrel of wine. The sailors leaned on the oars. Don't shoot. The Viscount shouted again. You can hurt Venus. The Turks saw the French and did the unthinkable. In order to quickly deliver the statue to their longboat, they threw it off the ropes and drove along a gentle slope like a barrel. In horror, Marsalles clutched at his head. These idiots would ruin a masterpiece. Finally, the French sailors moored to the shore and rushed to the Turks. The fight began. Everyone was mixed up in hand-to-hand combat. It was then that the statue cracked again. Grasping their part, the Turks retreated to the fieldage. And Marsalles, who ran up to the battlefield, got only the upper part of Venus, lying in the mud. The soiled bust was quickly wrapped in a mat and carried to the ship. There Marsalles unfolded the reconstructed part of Venus, and stared in horror at the bust. The goddess had no hands. The enraged Marquis de Rivia sent another ship to Milos, so that the sailors could search the coast. But they didn't find anything. Then the Marquis turned to the Turkish Sultan. he refused to sell his part of the statue. In addition, Russian merchants who had learned about the wonderful statue, who traded in Constantinople, also wanted to buy at least part of the statue. But the merchants did not have enough money. They quickly sent the paper to St. Petersburg, asking for a loan from the Russian government. The request has sunk into a bureaucratic quagmire. Meanwhile, Revere collected the necessary amount and bought the Turkish part. But the Sultan had no hands either. It had to Marquis, to connect what is. Venus has taken an honorable place in his collection, but unfortunately, without hands. By that time, the period of complication of relations with the Greeks had already begun. Those stated, in spite of the fact that now Greece and Milos are in Turkish possession, at the time of the creation of Venus the Greeks were free. So now they demanded to return the statue to its original land. Revere did not wait for him to be declared a thief to the whole world, and Venus declared stolen. A clever diplomat made an equally clever move. He presented it to his master, King Louis XVIII. However, the king did not want a dubious statue. The goddess was sent to the Louvre Museum. And in 1821, the Venus de Milo appeared to the world, put on public display. The queues at the Louvre were long. Art historians wondered, who is the author? But the audience was more interested in what the goddess was holding. The discussion has grown. Some believed that in the hands of Venus was a mirror, others claimed that the goddess held the cover in her hands. And only half a century later, in 1872, the French ambassador to Greece, Jules Ferry, understood how to solve this mystery. Yes, you just need to ask Buttonese. The father of the family was not alive at that time, but his son and nephew, decrepit and impoverished, still huddled in the family shack. Apparently, the Turks did not pay them very generously. The resourceful Ferry took out some coins. Do you remember Venus? What did she have in her hands? The old men stared at the visitor in perplexity. Of course the apple, my lord. Ferry's article in a science magazine made a splash. Connoisseurs of antiquity wondered, how did such a simple answer never occur to anyone? Of course Venus held the apple, because it was Paris who gave it to her, recognizing as the most beautiful of all earthly women. However, the public was not satisfied with the solution. People wanted to see everything with their own eyes. The 20th century began with a new expedition. In 1901, enthusiasts searched through the coast of Milos, on which Venus was once found. But they did not find any lost hands. By the middle of the century began a sensation. First in 1964, Turkish professor Ahmed Rizm said that he knew where the lost hands of the goddess were. But the current owners will return them only if the French transport the statue to Istanbul. Hearing this, art historians said that this is pure extortion. Then, the news spread throughout the world that the Louvre received a secret message about the whereabouts of the greatest hands of the world. But the second message did not come to the museum, and the newspapers declared a rumor, a publicity stunt. Well, and then it came, and quite incredible news. A certain Brazilian millionaire acquired the hands of Venus for $35,000. But according to the terms of the sale, he can present the purchase to the world only after 3 years. The Louvre stopped waiting and finally, after 3 years, received copies of hands. Alas! There was no sensation. The verdict rendered by the scientists was brief. These hands do not belong to Venus de Milo. Throughout the 20th century, miraculously found hands of Venus appeared here and there. Of course, the museum workers did not allow to experiment with the priceless statue, but sometimes under pressure from the public, they made strange photos, in which the beauty appeared with one hand or with other hands. All these photos caused a shock. Venus with hands lost beauty and charm. Moreover, the lady with her hands became monstrous. Why do we want Venus so much to have hands to fit beauty with our understanding? Wrote after one such experiment journalist Figaro. Why do we definitely need to improve something? The geniuses of past centuries have taught us a wonderful lesson. The power of beauty is not in definiteness, but in a mysterious secret that you want to reveal. But this should not be done. He must be right. After all, there must be some mystery in a woman, especially in a goddess. As long as the secret is preserved, it will be attractive and beautiful.